What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Facts and Stats. This is now episode 83. I have a guest here with me. I'm allowing him to introduce himself, and we'll go ahead and kick this thing off.
Yo, what's good, Ed? It's NMZ Hoops here. For those of you that know me on Twitter, I'll be talking a lot of basketball. I'll be coming into spaces every, once in a while. So, I'm glad. Thanks for inviting me on.
No questions. I appreciate you coming on. If you are tuned into this so far, make sure you do subscribe to the YouTube channel and also like and comment and tell a friend about Facts and Stats. What he was referring to with Spaces is I host Twitter Spaces every day at 11 a.m. at Facts and Stats _ on Twitter. So you guys should make sure you tap into that. NMZ is a guy that I probably met or heard of some months back when he came to the Spaces. Like your basketball mind, bro. Like how you talk about the game, So I'm glad to have you on. We have numerous topics to talk about today: the Celtics, the Warriors, Anthony Davis going down, early NBA war predictions, and so forth. Um, so we're probably going to kick this episode off with the Boston Celtics. Obviously, they've been the highlight of the NBA going into the season. There was a lot of not speculation, but news of the Ime Udoka news, and people wondering how would the Boston Celtics fare or play up to par coming off a finals exit to the Warriors. They start off the season pretty hot. They're currently 22-9. Had a historic offense up to the last 5 games where they departed or dropped in that. And now they're coming off 2 back-to-back losses to the Orlando Magic. What's your thoughts on the Boston Celtics, and how do you feel like they fare in the Eastern Conference when it comes to potentially making the finals again?
Yeah, so like you touched on, they were the hottest team out of the gate. Like you said, record-setting start on offense. Rob's been out to start the year, right? So they've had a really nice five-out approach. I think they're taking about 44% of their shots from three, so they're getting up a lot of threes. And you're gonna have nights to start the year. They're shooting ridiculous from three. Like most nights, they were hitting 20, 22 threes a night. And then it's kind of tailed off in recent weeks. We saw them lose twice to Orlando this week, and that's just kind of the nature of when you play kind of a high variance style with a lot of 3-point shots. So their offense is trending down. I'd say this month. I think they were like 30th. I saw some stat go up on
Yeah.
Twitter in offensive rating this month, but they're also trending up in defense. They're still the number one offense overall in the season. Obviously, that's how hot of a start they had. But I think for them, I think the most important thing is, can you manage Rob Williams, keep him healthy? Obviously, Horford's a little bit older in age. I think the one thing I would really watch for this team is their front line. They're a little bit thin. I think like I think they're going to be a solid regular season team, no doubt. Come playoff time, though, with Embiid, Giannis, the Twin Towers in Cleveland, so on and so forth, being thin on the front line, you don't want to have to rely too much on Cornette, Vonleh, Blake Griffin. I think you got to keep Rob and Al really solid. So that's what I'm really looking forward to. Maybe they even make a move and try to address that.
So interesting. First time I heard someone bring up the likes of potentially going up against Embiid or Giannis or even the Twin Towers, as you referenced in Cleveland with Mobley and Allen. Uh, Say they don't make a move, right? And you referenced that they shooting 44% of their shots from the 3-point line. How does that balance out? Do you think that with offensive structure or gameplay like that, shoot a ton of threes and potentially having front court issues, how do you think they'll be in the playoffs? And then you reference speaking on Sixers or Milwaukee, like how do you think the series with those teams will go?
Yeah, I mean it's a little bit of give and take, right? I think that Bucks series last year, like we saw how the Game Seven played
Yeah,
out. They had Brook Lopez on the floor, and we know Lopez's style. He loves to take away the rim, and we saw Grant in that Game Seven get up 18 threes. He hit 7 out of 18, and that was enough to get them by. I still like their defensive approach altogether. I think what really helps the Celtics, even though they don't have multiple bigs that they can count on, is they have big athletic wings, really physically imposing group. Grant Williams, Jason Tatum, even Jalen Brown. So they're able to kind of throw those guys at you, and that's why their switching scheme was so good and so versatile. So I think overall they'll be fine. Where you do get a little scared is, like I said, Rob's injury health, Al's age, and then potentially foul trouble. A guy like Giannis or Embiid, they're getting to the free throw line consistently, and they can play your bigs off the floor. But on the flip side, Boston's 3-point shooting, if they get hot, they can force you to make some tough decisions. They can play a Lopez off the floor. They can force Embiid to step out further than he'd like to. Things like that. So their style is a little bit different than the other teams in the East,
yeah.
but they'll
So
make it tough on those teams as
uh,
well.
through 31 games, I don't have this written down at the moment, but through 31 games, I believe Tatum is still averaging 30, and I think Jalen Brown is averaging 26, 27. They have emerged as one of the top, we'll say probably top three duo, top five, whatever you want to say for that aspect. How do you feel about them, the pairing in general, and how do you feel like they both improved their games this offseason?
I think they're right up there as one of the best duos, like you said. My favorite thing about them this season is that they're getting theirs within the flow of the offense. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, Jason Tatum has had some nights where he's exploded, some nights where he's not played as well. Jaylen Brown's been pretty steady, consistent for them. I like that, the Brogdon pickup, Derek White, Marcus Smart. None of those guys are like elite point guards, quote unquote, but they're all solid. They're all capable ball handlers, can get you the basketball where you need to, and that allows them to kind of play Tatum and Brown in this like nice off ball role, get them catching it, attacking in motion. Because we saw last year's playoffs, specifically in the Miami and Golden State series, how the floor felt really condensed and they were able to load up on those guys. And Brown and Tatum would really struggle in traffic with their handle and turn the ball over. And I thought that's what cost them in last year's postseason. I thought they were significantly more talented than Miami. And I thought they could have won the Warriors series, but they allowed those teams to force turnovers and get out in transition, which then didn't allow them to set their, historic half court defense. So getting Brogdon for the price they got him at two,
Right,
three
right,
like non-rotation guys and one first-round pick,
right.
I think that signing will pay huge dividends in the playoffs. Just as a guy who can kind of organize them and be a calming presence when Tatum and Brown are maybe struggling in traffic. So I think
No,
that's what I like the most—the fact that they can get it off the ball.
I agree. I agree with everything you said. Me personally, to be honest, I was one of the guys. I don't know how you feel. I didn't get your stance on that. I was one of the guys when the Udoka news hit and Joe Mazzulla had to be the interim head coach going forward for this season. Um, I had a lot of respect and a lot of praise for Udoka. I felt like he impacted those guys tremendously. He pretty much I'm not gonna say shifted the culture because Boston, I think prior to him, made 3 or 4 Eastern Conference Finals anyway within the last 5 6 years. I just feel like the impact and the plays and the leadership that he provided on the sideline for those guys was very very big. So without him, I sensed a little drop, but not a drop outside of the top 4 seed. I believe I had Milwaukee, Boston, Philly, and Miami. Obviously, Miami's probably not going to be a top 4 seed anymore. Um, but I want you to do a deeper dive into. With all that being said, I want you to feel like how was your thoughts for Boston going into the season, and then do a deeper dive into that playoff scenario. Which team do you feel like the Boston may lose to in the playoffs, or do you just, as of right now, you feel like they're going back to the finals no matter what?
So for the Ime thing, right? And this is partially because he had a great first season with them.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously loses his job. I didn't have much intel on Joe Mazzulla, so I didn't really know who he was, none of that stuff. I didn't pay attention to, kind of what he did beforehand. But he did come up in that Celtics farm tree. We even see Will Hardy in
Right.
Utah like doing a really good job. So
Right.
if we look at it from that perspective, I think they got a guy in there, and Brad even in the presser when they were introducing him sounded very confident about his abilities as a head coach. And I think having watched him this season, he's a pretty creative mind. He's done a good job with them. But yeah, I think Ime kind of changed this team psychologically, and I think the biggest thing with the Celtics last year I noticed was that accountability changed for them.
Mm-hmm.
Early in the year, we saw Ime, even when they started out not too hot, they were around 500, I think 40 games in. Ime made it a point of emphasis to say, "Yo, we need more out of Brown and Tatum. These guys are not moving the basketball. We're not defending at a high enough level. Things like that." And we saw Marcus Smart, the longest tenured player, kind of like I think finally become a full on leader
Yeah.
under Ime, and there was kind of a respect factor going around in that locker room. Guys could kind of talk to each other and address what wasn't happening on the floor, and I thought that's when they really took off. I will say this though, with Missoula coming in, and obviously this is a really talented team. Just because Ime is not there anymore, I think just having made that finals run, getting over the hump, and getting out of the East, I don't think they lose all of that just because Ime is not there anymore. I think once you've kind of addressed that and you get over that, I think it's something that's kind of ingrained in you. So even though Ime is not there, and he's not there on like a day-to-day to work with these guys, I don't think that all of what they went through last year, becomes a wash. I think they carry that on and continue. I think that's what we're seeing right now.
Okay, yeah, and I agree. You said so. Repeat your last part. I'm sorry. Repeat your last thing you said. You said you.
Basically, I'm saying I don't think what they learned and what they went through last year with
Mm-hmm.
Ime becomes a wash because he's gone now. I think there's some carryover there. Obviously, it's a new voice and some things are going to change, but I don't think they lose that entire experience. Getting over the hump and getting out of the East, I think, was a big step forward for them in their trajectory.
Right, so I'm trying to lean this towards the Western Conference. The next thing I want to talk to you about is who do you feel like is coming off the Western Conference. So I'm trying to ask you, as of right now, do you see Boston coming out of the East, Philly, Milwaukee, or etc.?
Yeah, I think I still like Boston as my team to win the Eastern Conference right now, the way things stand.
Okay, cool. Appreciate that. As far as the West now,
Mhm.
when I first reached out to you, the Pelicans and the Grizzlies had the best records in the Western Conference. Arguably playing the best team basketball. I had to do a big emphasis on team because those are two teams that drafted well, developed young guys well. Jaren Bain, Dylan Brooks is
Hmm.
Dylan Brooks, and then on Pelican side you have a Herb, you have a Trey Murphy who excelled, Jose Alvarado who they found, and many more. They are a young team, they're a young fun team, but the Pelicans are now on a 4-game losing streak. Memphis is holding down the number one seed still, and they actually play Denver tonight for the battle of the number
Hmm.
one seed. So with that being said, I just want your thoughts on the Western Conference as of right now. It's obviously been shaky. It's been tricky. Anthony Davis out for a month. Curry out for a couple of weeks. How are you feeling about the West overall before you get to the point to where you feel like who do you think is coming out?
Yeah, the West is very tight in the standings. This is like, I think in like 2017 through 2019, right, when the Warriors kind of put together their team, we kind of got away from it. Kind of skewed our perception of what a contender looks like. Everybody's gonna have a flaw, right?
Yeah,
Those
yeah,
Warrior teams were so much higher than the other teams that now you hear fans complain like, "Oh, we're not good at this," but like every team's got something they're lacking, right? And that's what makes it fun. Like you've got to find a way to kind of hide your weakness while kind of going at what the other team's not as good at. The two teams you mentioned, the Grizzlies and the Pelicans, I think the Pelicans are now fourth. That's how tight the West is. You
yeah. I
lose
think
one night,
yeah,
you go down
yeah.
two spots. Those teams are, homegrown, small market teams. They've drafted extremely well. They've made solid trades. Obviously, they both got a superstar in that 2019 draft.
Hmm.
Um, if I had to say who I favor, even though I like both teams a lot, I would say the Grizzlies. I think they're a very
Uh,
physically imposing team. Like I said
uh,
about Boston,
See, I
they
did it.
smoke teams in transition. Go ahead, go ahead.
No, yeah, I did and I think this is my favorite conversation between these two teams. You hit it right
Mm,
on the nose. They obviously both landed a superstar 1 and 2 in the draft. Both of those guys, I think they're from North Carolina actually too, or South Carolina.
mm-hmm,
It's I made a poll on the Facts and Stats Twitter page last week or 2 weeks ago. Concluded about 150 plus votes, and I said literally, if they were to match up in the playoffs, who do you guys feel like is going to win this series? And the Pelicans won that series. The Pelicans won that poll. Um, at the time, I didn't really agree with it, so I want to hear your reason on why you feel like Memphis will win in a series, a potential playoff matchup.
yeah, yeah. I think the Grizzlies are a very physically imposing team. I think they smoke teams in transition, they crash the offensive glass hard. They're physical. They bump you defensively. I thought, the other day in that Bucks game, they completely dominated them in every
Yeah,
facet of the
yeah,
game. And that's a Bucks team that's what, number one in the West, and the Bucks are a proven regular season team. So for them to
right.
get stomped by 40, that's impressive. I like their depth a lot. They have a lot of different options, and that optionality I think becomes really important come playoff time. You need to play big, you need to play small, have a lineup out there with guys that can shoot. Coach Jenkins, and this is a credit to their scouting department and player development
Yeah,
too.
for
But
sure.
it feels like every young guy they bring in
Yeah,
comes in, finds a role, and starts playing well. And there's nobody complains about role
yeah.
definition. Like Zaire Williams was a lottery pick, but he is really locked in on his role. He
Hmm.
understands what he needs to do in that team, and he plays it to a T. And I think they're also resilient. They've had injuries to obviously Jaw last year, Jaren to start the year, Bane's out right now, and they kind of just keep going. They're steady. They don't fall off with one guy out of the lineup. Somebody steps up, kind of the next man up approach. I really like that because you know what can happen in playoff basketball. Somebody can be out, and if they've proven guys 9, 10, and 11 stay ready, and I think they're going to probably finish with the number one seed in the West, and I think that home court throughout the West playoffs is going to be very important. And then comparing them just to the Pelicans 1-1, I think them having been in the postseason a couple times,
Hmm.
them having played in the play-in, those kind of tight, single game elimination atmospheres, they've been there. The Pelicans, not so much. They've made one playoff run last year, but Zion wasn't even in it. So I think it's a little different, but I think the Grizzlies are a little bit more experienced, a little bit of a deeper team. So I like the Grizzlies.
Okay, experience a little more of a deeper team. Okay. Um, One may push back. I mean, we're on the same side, so I can't really push back. But one may push back and say a guy like Trey Murphy, obviously one of the better shooters in this league. He's also shown his athleticism this year as well. Who most did not know that he even had, in his bag. To be a shooter and to be that athletic is a big plus. Najee Marshall, another wing defender that they have over there that can put the ball, that can put the ball in the hoop. He's not afraid to get to the rim. He also can knock down the outside shot here and there. Jose Alvarado, he seemed like he'd been an instant spark to what the Pelicans did or do offensively and defensively when he comes off the bench. And then they like to go small as well. They like to take Jonas out the game. Shout out to him for hitting 7 threes last night, by the way. But they like to take Jonas out the game, and bring Larry Nance in, and display that small ball lineup a little bit with Zion running the point forward. So I don't know, man. I think when Brandon Ingram comes back, CJ, I think, who does need to come off the ball just a tad bit, a little bit. I think they need to utilize CJ in a scoring role. He's not really a point guard, never was a point guard, obviously. It could be a fun matchup, but again, we're on the same side, so I can't really do too much pushback in that aspect. I think it'll be a fun series. I think that's what the Western Conference needs for sure. But before we speak on more of like who's actually coming out of the West to you, I want to hear your Golden State Warriors thoughts. They're sitting at 15-16 right now. Curry, they're fresh off a championship run at that. I want to always highlight that. Shout out to the Warriors for that. That was a tremendous whole entire playoff run. To play Curry missing games in the first round, to Curry willing to come off the bench in the first round, to ultimately being down 2-1 to the Celtics and then winning 3 straight games was phenomenal. So shout out to them for that. 15-16, Curry out for a couple of weeks. Wiggins been dealing with an injury as well this season. Clay does not play back-to-backs. How are you feeling about the Warriors right now? Because like you said, over the last 7 years, we all had the same feeling. Man, this team is really damn good. I don't really see too many teams on this level. You add Kevin Durant, and that put them at another level. So now they're coming down to reality just a tad bit. 15-16 through 31 games. How are you feeling about them?
Yeah, they're in a bit of a tough spot right now. I think you didn't get the early season wins. A little bit was a championship hangover. They've been absolutely awful on the road. They've been good at home, but they've just been their game hasn't traveled this year. Their first unit is putting up some pretty impressive numbers collectively. Like their net rating for the starters is really high, and then their bench is turning the ball over, not really giving them good production. I think this stretch of games is important. When Wiggins comes back from the adductor strain he's out with, and I think Poole's going to be able to gain a little bit of confidence because he's going to have the ball in his hands, and they kind of need him. He's the only guy right now on the floor that can really get his and create for somebody else. So him kind of breaking out of his shell a little bit. Clay's situation is a little dicey. I think he's still kind of pressing a little bit because, coming back from injury, you're trying to regain who you once were, but you got to find yours within the flow of the offense. There's a little bit of a weird dynamic there, but I'm never going to count the Warriors out. I will never count the Warriors out. What I will say is, depending on how this next month or so goes with Steph out and where they end up in the standings, them, winning the West might have to be, them navigating a play-in game or coming out as a 6th seed or something like that, which is tough because, as tight as the West has been, I think once the things stabilize and we start to see who the top 3 or 4 teams are, if you're a 6, 7 seed, that means you got to win probably 3 straight rounds without home court advantage to get back to the NBA Finals, and that's tough.
Yeah.
I don't think the talent gap between them and the other teams is enough for them to really, go into every series like that and win. I think last year, their financial situation cost them guys like GP2 and Otto Porter. It was kind of, assumed by Warrior fans in the front office that a lot of these young guys would step up and fill those holes. Kuminga, Moody, obviously Wiseman coming back from injury, but that hasn't been, what they expected. Wiseman's had to go down to the G League. Kuminga's showing flashes.
Yeah.
I personally expected more from Moody in year 2. I don't think he's been as good as I thought he would be. DiVincenzo's a fine player. I don't think he has the on-court impact that GP2 did. So their roster has taken a little bit of a step back. So when they get healthy, I think there's going to be tremendous pressure on their top 6 guys, so the starters and Jordan Poole, to kind of help them. But I mean, just having seen what they did last year, it's impossible for me to just write them off completely.
Yeah.
I think they'll find a way. In, but depending on where they are in the standings, it's going to be tough.
Yeah, no, I agree. And for all the people that are going to watch this, you actually pointed out a great point. To finish the 6th seed and not have home court advantage, they obviously been struggling on the road. And me personally, I feel like that may continue throughout the course of the season. I don't think they're ever going to be dominant on the road, to be honest. They always been good at home. But great point for that, to potentially head into the playoffs and have to play 3 straight matchups where you're not the favorites or have home court advantage. So with that being said, do you see a scenario where they can come out of the Western Conference? Who are you feeling like? You told me the East, you're feeling like Boston. Cool. Who are you feeling like in the West as of right now through 30 games of basketball being played is probably going to come out of the Western Conference? Or who do you feel like, 2 questions, I'm sorry. The matchup for the Western Conference Finals, and then who do you feel like will win that matchup?
Wow, okay. That one caught me a little bit off guard. So with the Warriors, let me say this real quick about the Warriors, right? A lot of people early in the season asking me, NMZ, are you worried about the Warriors? And I kept saying no. Like, I think they'll be fine. I think there's a little bit of championship hangover. Now it's like, Steph is out. This is a little bit of a wake-up call for the Warriors players right now. I think they've got to find a way to stay afloat while he's out. So if the Warriors, and I'm not very confident in saying that. I don't know if they will, right? Yeah. They have the championship infrastructure, so I'm not saying it's impossible, but I'm not favoring it. I like the Grizzlies to come out of the West. I like
Yeah,
their
that's yeah,
process on both ends more than any team right now. I think home court advantage, like I said earlier, is going to be very important. They've got a lot of answers depending on whatever matchup they see, because obviously the playoffs are a game of matchups, right? If they need to play big with Steven Adams on the floor against a guy like Nikola Jokic, they can do that. If they need to downsize and have guys with quicker foot speed like Jaren Jackson and Brandon Clark, they can do that. I think when Bane gets back, I think that'll open up their offense a little bit more. I think they're a top five defense and a top 10 offense last time I checked. Those are usually good indicators of a team that's a contender that can get it done. With home court, I think I like the Grizzlies coming out of the West. Who I would expect to meet them in the conference finals. This is where it gets dicey. I'm not a big fan of the Nuggets defensively. I have a lot of question marks,
yeah, yeah,
especially with the approach from Mike Malone. I think they allow teams to draw Jokic into action too easily. I don't
yeah.
think they do a good enough job hiding him as they should. The Clippers are just so hard to read because
Yeah, I
one game
want.
they look whole and they're playing well, and
Yeah, I
then
wanted your thoughts on the
another game they're just
Clippers. I
missing.
wanted your thoughts on the Clippers too.
It's hard to say because Kawhi and PG are just not there consistently, and I
Yeah,
think even in previous years we've seen, when your best guys are out, it's hard to kind of establish that rhythm, that chemistry, continuity you need going into playoff time. They've been really good defensively. I think Zubac deserves a shout out. He's been kind of holding it down for them, even though he's like their only true lone big, which kind of scares me a little bit for like a playoff run. But offensively, they've been a disaster this year. Their two guys have obviously been out, but I've watched a couple games this year. It's a lot of isolation ball from
yeah.
role players, tough twos. I don't really love their offensive approach, and unless you're getting me top five player in the world, Kawhi Leonard, I don't like them coming out of the West, me
Yeah,
personally. And it's just hard for me to say that he's going to be there right now.
yeah.
Can't even play every night. So if I had to pick a team, if the Warriors are in the picture, I think they're getting to the conference finals. That's what I'll say. If they can get in the playoffs, I think they'll get there with the Grizzlies.
Okay. Well said. I appreciate you for answering that and also answering all questions so far. Um, I didn't want to. I should have said prior, but I do have the Grizzlies coming out of the Western Conference as well. I like what they showed me. In that matchup last year with Golden State. Obviously, Ja went down, so that changed the dynamic of the series. And most people will say, well, they blew him out with Ja Morant not being on the court. Still, his impact, his rim pressure, his ability to play make for all the other guys on the team was very, very important. I think Golden State sort of kind of struggled with that. Now when you add that extra experience and that extra year under your belt, they want the smoke. They want Golden State. They know all the hooray and hoop line that Draymond and the whoop that trick and all that the Golden State was doing last year to beat them in the playoffs. I think John Morant, Jaren Bane, Dylan, Zaire, they all want that matchup again, and I would love, love, love to see that again. I would turn towards Golden State. Um, I want you to explain on why you think this year around, if the Warriors make it to play the Grizzlies again, why do you think that ultimately Ja will take the reins from Curry in that matchup and head toward the finals?
Yeah, I think first off, the Warriors, if they get in around a 6-7 seed, will probably have had to navigate two pretty tough opponents in the
Mm-hmm.
opening rounds, right? I think they'll have, potentially 6-7 game series, once or twice coming into that round. And I think if they're a little bit beat up coming into that round, and like I said, I only really trust their top six right now. I don't see 7, 8, and 9 on their side performing the same way I see 7, 8, and 9 in Memphis performing right now. I think Memphis has answers. I think the Warriors series, it might be a little tough to play Steven Adams on the floor, but if they go that way, because last year's series, Kevon Looney and Andrew Wiggins destroyed them on the offensive glass. Like going back to last year's matchup, I think they're going to have to play Steven Adams a little bit in stretches to try to secure defensive rebounds. But Steph makes it tough, so they're going to have to be on their p's and q's with Steph out there. Dylan Brooks will probably grab that matchup. But even in last year's series, Ja went down. Bane was dealing with the back. There was some stuff going on Memphis' side as well. Obviously, GP2 went down for them, but I think the Warriors have taken a little bit of a step back. I think they're still contenders when they're healthy.
Yeah.
I think the Grizzlies are ascending a little bit, so I think that gap we saw last year is getting closer. And then if it comes down to it, and there's a game 7 on Memphis's home floor, I think I like Memphis in that. I'm gonna take the home team in that situation.
All right. Look, we all heard it. You have the Grizzlies and the Celtics in the NBA Finals matchup. I want to circle back to the Eastern Conference. Who would you have ultimately meeting the Celtics in that matchup? And then also, is it real? What I mean by is it real, we have two, not one, but two. And this, don't get me wrong, this state dealt with a lot of bad basketball over the course of the years. The New York Knicks and the Brooklyn Nets are both on win streaks. The Nets are on a 7 game, or no, the Knicks are on a 6 game. And the Knicks are on a 7 game. The Nets won 9 of their last 10. The Knicks won 8 out of their last 10. How are you feeling about those two teams? first, and then who do you have meeting the Celtics in the Eastern Conference Finals? Is it real? That's what I mean.
Yeah, cool. So it's funny. I was talking to a couple friends yesterday. 3 through 7 in the East. I think that's from Cleveland to Miami, with the two New York teams
Yeah.
and Philly in between. None of those teams have really wanted to lose over the last 2 weeks. They're all on like
Yeah.
4, 5, 6, 7 game win streak. So it's
Yeah.
like when you're on your best stretch of the season, it sucks because you can't create any separation because the team right next to you is on a win streak of their own. For the Nets, I think this is going to be the stretch where we learn about the Nets right here. They play Golden State, Milwaukee, Cleveland in their next year. Obviously, Golden State's without Steph.
Ooh.
Still, though, Milwaukee and Cleveland after that are the games that follow. Those
That's
are
the
two
next
teams
three
that are,
games.
yep, Golden State, Milwaukee, Cleveland. And Milwaukee and Cleveland are the teams, well, Milwaukee's 2 spots over them, or 3 spots, sorry. So 2 teams above them. They're 2 of the 3 teams above them in the standing, so they can maybe make up a little bit of ground. If they can win those 3 games, right, it kind of legitimizes the stretch we just seen. They started 2-6, they're 17-6 since.
Yeah.
A lot of people are saying, though, they've had a light schedule. They've played a lot of teams ravaged by injuries, things like that. I think their process on both ends has been really good. Jacques Vaughn deserves a shout out. They're playing much better basketball as of late. Kyrie's kind of came back and they've found their stride, and they've dealt with a little bit of injuries here and there, but for the most part, KD's I think only missed 1 rest game against Indiana, which they found a way to win.
Yeah.
But for the most part, he's having a crazy efficient year. I think if they can win, if they go 3-0 in this stretch right here, and they keep trending upwards in the standings, maybe getting that top 3, I think KD has a very compelling case of actually winning MVP.
Yeah.
I think the Nets deserve some recognition and contender talk. I think a lot of people have been kind of weary in putting them there because of what we've seen in the previous years with all the distractions and stuff off the floor. But if that stuff kind of dissipates and they prove they can stay focused on basketball, it's hard to say a team with Kevin Durant and that much talent doesn't factor in the Eastern Conference winning the East basically.
Okay. Oh, well said. Okay. Some Nets praise in here from NMZ. As far as the Knicks, 7 game, is it real or is it just how you feeling?
They've also had a little bit of a lighter schedule, but I will say they've changed their rotation a bit. Tibbs is playing some of the right guys. A lot of people on Knicks Twitter have been advocates for guys like Deuce McBride and
Quentin Grimes.
On his name right now. Quentin Grimes,
Yeah.
and those 2 guys have been really good defensively. They've actually, as a team, really picked it up defensively, which is Tibbs' calling card, and they're improving a lot on the details. They've kind of factored out the guys that haven't been playing as well on that end. Offensively, I think what Jalen Brunson has done for Julius Randle, making the game easier for him, minus that one end-of-game possession against the Bulls. I don't know why they had Julius just stand there and take that fade. That was, I don't know what that was.
I didn't
but
like that at all.
Right? In general, I think Brunson has done a really good job for this offense. I'm kind of hoping I will take this team a lot more serious if they can figure out how to get RJ Barrett to be an efficient scorer.
Yeah.
I think he uses so many possessions over the course of a game, and for him to be shooting, at or around 40%, not knocking down his 3 ball at the clip he did in 2021, things like that. They're going to have to find a way to get him going offensively just because they play so many possessions through him. And then, you've got 3 guys, 3 left-handed scorers that are interesting. I'm not saying I like this team to win a playoff series or anything like that, but kind of like 2021. They can be a tough team. They can get in the playoffs. They can make it tough on somebody in the first round potentially.
Yeah.
But if they stay around the 5-6 seed, I'll say this for Knicks fans. I think they might deserve an all-star, maybe an injury replacement guy.
Okay, appreciate that. 2 quick questions. Just want to hear how you feel about the Miami Heat. Before I get your thoughts on that, say a scenario where obviously they have some good players, or they have some guys that teams can use. The Toronto Raptors, they're now out of nowhere on a 6-game losing streak. Just dropped another game last night to Philly, where that was actually a good game, a good close to the game. Tobias did a nice clutch 3 to ultimately help them win the game. Siakam came back to another layup, and then they went to overtime, and overtime happened. Philly ended up coming up with the win. Say Toronto gets the play-in, and they ultimately play the Knicks in a play-in scenario. Who do you think's win that one game?
That's tough. So, Toronto. I watched that Toronto game yesterday. I've actually watched all 3 Toronto-Philly games, and they're tough because they crash the offensive glass hard. They run in transition. They make up for their deficiencies as a half-court offense by just winning the hustle points. You know what I mean? They force a lot of turnovers, things like that. So in a one-game setting, Toronto is a very dangerous team. As of late, their 3-point shooting has been really bad. I'm not a big fan of their offensive approach, me personally. I think the Raptors could have a lot of trouble if the Knicks kind of what they're doing on the defensive end holds, and this is who they are defensively. I think they could give Toronto a lot of trouble scoring. I think that would be like a low scoring throwback type of game. But I'm gonna be honest, I like Jalen Brunson in that type of situation, finding a way. He's crafty, gets to the middle of the floor, he finds guys. I don't love either team offensively, but I would lean Knicks just because I trust the ball in Jalen Brunson's hands.
Okay.
That's kind of how I would answer that.
I like that. I like that. I like that. Real quick, Miami Heat thoughts. They're on a 4 game winning streak. They're now above 500. How are you feeling about that team? They went to the Eastern Conference Finals last year, and obviously the finals 2 years ago. So how are you feeling?
Yeah, I know that's another team. I said this about the Warriors earlier. I don't write off the Heat. For the past few years, I've always been lower on them, and then come playoff time, they find a way to overachieve. Minus 2021, I believe,
Yeah.
but for the most part, they overachieve. I think they need a move. I think they do need to address that 4 spot early in the year before Markkanen broke out in Utah. I was like, I would look at Markkanen.
Hmm.
People were like, I don't know if he really fits, but now he's probably like out of their price range
Yeah.
the way he's
Right.
played.
Right.
But somebody along those lines that can fill that spot at the 4 where you're not really losing too much offensively. They can shoot the ball, they can play handle, all these things because we know how the Heat love to run their offense. It's kind of like a Warriors light. There's a lot of movement. Everybody's for the most part can dribble, pass, and shoot. They're getting healthy. I know Jimmy missed a stretch of games. I think Bam's been phenomenal holding it down for them. I do think they got to address that 4 spot and then their guard rotation. And this is why I like Spo. Spo's always been a guy. He's gonna play the guy that gives him the best chance to win. So if Lowry doesn't have it, he's gonna play Vincent. Max Strus will be on the floor if he's knocking down shots. Hero's been playing well as of late in the games I've caught. I haven't watched too much of the Heat, but I'm sure they'll pick it up in the second half of the season. I always feel like the Heat, once they get their kind of iron out the details, they're always one of those teams that picks it up in the second half of the year. They'll probably be like in the 6, 7 seed range, but come playoff time, if you're one of those higher seeds, that's like a team like we don't want to really see them. They're gonna make it tough on us.
No, I agree, and I appreciate that as well. Um, where I'm going with that, as far as the Heat, can I get that matchup? Who do you think will play the Boston Celtics in the Eastern Conference Finals?
Yeah, so to me right now, I think the East boils down to 5 teams. Celtics, the Bucks, obviously. I think the Cavs are in that talk. I like the Nets, and I like the Sixers. So if I do it from a process of elimination standpoint, I think Cleveland's lack of wing depth and playing 2 small guards will come back to bite them at some point in the playoffs. Not necessarily sure against who, but if I had to bet on it, I wouldn't pick Cleveland. So I would knock Cleveland out of the picture.
Okay.
So then the next 3 teams, Milwaukee, Philly, and Brooklyn, I think these teams, for the most part, in a playoff setting, they all got weaknesses. They've all got strengths. I think Milwaukee's like the safe pick, just because we've seen them before. They've done it. Um, but I really like what I'm seeing from Brooklyn and Philly as of late. So
Yeah.
if I had to pick a team, man, this is tough. And I'm trying to like factor out health as much as possible. I want to just say all these teams are healthy because I know Embiid can sometimes break down in the playoffs. It's hard to just kind of like filter that out. I'll probably say the Bucks because I think jump shooting in the playoffs can kind of fall off at times, and the Bucks I think have the best trio of bigs in the NBA. I
Yeah.
think the
True.
Lopez Portis Giannis trio is very tough to deal with. Assuming Middleton kind of gets back to who he was pre-injury, if he can kind of find his game, and Drew's playing pretty well. Javon Carter's been really good defensively. I think they're a top 2 defense in basketball. That's going to carry over to the playoffs. I do think they need a move though. I think they got to add somebody on the wing. Joe Ingles came back, I believe, last night.
Yeah.
But I still think they need another piece. Maybe Jay Crowder from Phoenix. If they find a way to kind of add that additional piece into their rotation, then I kind of like what they're doing. But I wouldn't at all rule out Philly or Brooklyn. I think they're right on their heels. And I think Cleveland, they're good. They're in the picture, like a puncher's chance. But I'd say they're fifth, in my opinion.
Okay. I appreciate that. All right, so I have your Eastern Conference Finals and your Western Conference Finals matchups. Grizzlies versus the Warriors, Bucks versus the Celtics. There was a lot of people that said, even though Giannis did force a Game 7, if Middleton was there, he probably would have won that series. Now, you do have the Celtics making the finals. I want to hear your reasoning on why, even with the healthy team, like you said, health. And then also you did speak on them having arguably the best 3 front court rotational players, which is true. I think Bobby is second off the bench in double doubles around the league, or maybe even first. What's your thoughts on that potential matchup with everyone being healthy? Milwaukee versus Boston. Why do you have Boston winning that series?
Yeah, I think so. I think second half of the year, I think Boston's going to make a pretty big leap defensively. I think they're gonna find their way back into the top 10. I think they can make it extremely tough for a guy like Drew Holiday. If you watch Holiday a lot, come playoff time, I'm a little skeptical of his pull up jump shooting. And what Holiday does is he loves to resort to backing smaller guards down. But if you look at the makeup of the Celtics roster, there's not really a small guard for him to attack. I think their wing defenders can make it extremely tough. We saw what they did to a guy like KD. I think they can make it extremely tough on a guy like Chris Middleton, who's not, the most bursty athlete off the bounce.
Right.
He's a guy that hits tough shots. He's a shot maker. But I think Tatum, Brown, Grant, guys like that, they can make it tough on him as well. And I think just the experience of having played Giannis. I think having seen Giannis now, this would be, I think, their fourth time for some of those guys matching up with him in the playoffs. I think they're going to be prepared. I think they'll have a game plan ready for him. You could say the same thing vice versa, though. That's what happens when you start to see a team, numerous times in the
Right.
playoffs. Maybe the Bucks start to figure some things out on how to slow the Celtics. But I think we saw it in the Game 7 last year. I felt like that series went 7, but I thought the Celtics handed them 2 games. Obviously, Middleton didn't play, but I think the Celtics' ability to kind of open up the floor and really make it tough for Brook Lopez to just paint camp is what makes it tough. And if you can get Brook Lopez either off the floor or make him ineffective because you're not going to the rim and you're knocking down 3-point shots in your 5-out scheme, it makes Bud's decision tough. But admittedly, when Lopez sinks in that drop coverage, Tatum and Brown are going to have to be on their game with their pull-up jump
Yeah,
shooting.
for
Brown's been
sure.
really good in the mid-range this year. Tatum's had hot games. He's had cold games. That's one thing to watch for in that matchup, though, is who actually does win the number 1 seed. So that'll be a good game to watch on Christmas, so we can kind of forecast better of what that matchup's going to look
Yeah,
like.
and I definitely agree. And I got your stance on the Warriors and Grizzlies series. So now we're going to talk about the potential finals matchups, and then I'm just going to ask you some of your NBA awards predictions.
Hmm.
Just in the middle of, we're about a quarter or 25-30% into the season so far. Now, the Grizzlies, Celtics, NBA Finals, that would be damn exciting. I don't even have a thought on that. I didn't even think of that potential matchup yet. But if they were to meet in the finals, what's your prediction so far? How do you think that series goes? And ultimately, who do you think wins?
Yeah, so the two things I've mentioned in this podcast about the Celtics and the Grizzlies has been these are two physically imposing teams, right? And that's why I kind of like them over the field, given everything's equal. The Grizzlies and the Celtics, it would be a tough matchup. There would be, a lot of physicality. I think why I like Boston over Memphis to win the championship if this was the matchup is I trust Boston's shot making from the perimeter a little bit more than I trust Memphis. Just a shot creation aspect. I think Tatum and Brown are obviously the big names, but even the secondary guys that they can count on like Malcolm Brogdon, Marcus Smart's having a great season as a passer. Derek White's another guard they can throw out there, and even White and Smart I think are phenomenal defensive backcourt to really throw at John Morant and make it tough on him. The Grizzlies will make it tough because they do crash the glass hard. Steven Adams is going to keep possessions alive, and like I said, the Celtics front line has to stay healthy. An older Al Horford, Robert Williams, he's a question mark. But if they're able to, like I said, if given all things are equal, the health is there. I think the Celtics are a bit more of a talented team. I don't think there's a major coaching gap or anything that the Grizzlies can exploit in that regard. Both teams are deep, but I think the best player, in the series is going to be Jason Tatum, in my opinion. I think if he gets back on that stage, given how it went last year for him, I think he bounces back in a big way this time.
Yeah, I wish I can agree. I wish we can have a little conversation in regards to that. But I think it was about last month, or probably, yeah, sometime in November. I'm watching Boston. I watch a lot of Boston because a lot of people that I interact with on a day-to-day basis are in my Twitter spaces. Celtics fans are the majority of the fans that we get in there. Um, they're a damn good team. I think they're the best team in basketball easily. Even with dropping 2 games to Orlando, it doesn't really affect me or doesn't really change my thought process on them. The fact that they can come off the bench ultimately with Malcolm and Brogdon, and then it all depends on, I say Malcolm and Brogdon, Malcolm and Grant. Then it all depends on what they do with their lineup. I don't know if they're going to keep Rob coming off the bench or they're going to move D. White back to that bench role. So either way, it's a plus any way you spin it or any way you look at it. I just think the way they move the ball, I think the way they play team, the way they play offensively as a team, they're all willing passers. Sometimes Tatum and Brown may get stuck with the ball in the ISO game, but they're not really too. That's not the whole makeup of their team. It's not an LA Clipper situation to where it's ISO, barely any pick and rolls or anything like that. I think Boston do a fair share of pick and rolls, pick and pops with Al Horford, and just moving the ball in general. So I think this season is destined for them. I do think if they get that taste and they make it back to the finals, I don't really think anyone stands a shot at all. And I probably see a scenario where they beat the Grizzlies in 6. The Grizzlies make all a tough 6 games, but I think they'll beat the Grizzlies in 6. My last question to you, and again, thank you for coming on, is what are your early NBA award predictions? As of right now, who do you have as the MVP, 6-man, rookie, and so forth?
Okay, I'll do a quick rundown through each one. Um, my MVP prediction, and I'm just looking at the way the trends are going, right?
Mm-hmm.
Early in the year, I think I had Tatum for the people that were asking me the same question. I'm starting to think that KD might be able to steal MVP. I think we talked about the 3 game stretch they have coming up: Golden State, Milwaukee, Cleveland. If you win those 3 games and kind of legitimize the run they've been on, so they would be 20-6 now over their last 26 after starting 2-6. You're probably in that top 3 seed range, and given everything they've been through, I know there was a report recently saying KD won't get love in the MVP talks because of his trade request over the summer and all that. I think that's kind of BS. I don't think that has anything to do with what's on the floor right now. I think you should just keep it basketball. He's averaging an efficient 30 over the last 22. He's
Yeah.
defending at a much higher level. And he's the primary advantage creator after the Harden trade, right? There is no advantage creator that KD can rely on to just get him the basketball in his spots. He is the advantage creator. It's not Simmons, it's not Kyrie, it's KD. And KD's having a fantastic playmaking season, opening up the floor for guys. And guys are knocking down shots. TJ Warren just got back. Yuta Watanabe hasn't missed a corner three, it feels like, all season. Kyrie's kind of finding his and fitting in. I think if KD continues to lead this group, because a lot of people have had question marks about KD, the leader. And I know he had a quote earlier this year about, the lineup and all that stuff. But if he's winning games, right, because winning kind of cures everything, it's hard to look at what he's doing right now and say he's not going to be the MVP,
No, I agree.
especially if he stays on the court healthy.
Yeah, good points. For me, going into the season, and I'll probably speak on mine after you do every one of yours as well. Going into the season, super duper Luka Doncic fan. I love how he plays the game of basketball. I did have Luka ultimately. Finally, I know going into the last 2 seasons, the media was trying to push Luka as the MVP favorite. And he's just one of my favorite players for the last 4 years. I did want him to get that, but now it's looking like an unrealistic scenario for me. Tatum is looking like the early favorite, but I'm leaning towards Giannis. Most people are out on Giannis because of the start, sort of kind of efficiently that he had towards the season so far. But I think he's starting to trend toward the upward direction and up in his efficiency. He still has the same defensive impact. He obviously improved his game to me, not only as a scorer but as a passer. The way he passes the ball now out of double teams and quote unquote wall defenses or this team showing two at him night in and night out. It's amazing. So I think Giannis, even last night was imprint. Zion, who's been playing great basketball over the last 10 plus games, they pretty much held Zion in check for the most part. I think Zion had 17 or 18, but Zion seen two all night. And the fact that Zion was a winning passer the whole entire game, when the doubles were coming, he was hitting Jonas, he was hitting I think Trey sometimes, Dyson sometimes, CJ, whoever the case may be, Zion was winning passing. But Giannis put his stamp on that game from start to finish. I think he had 40 and 10, 12 and 17 from the floor. Great game for him. I think he's going to trend upwards now. They're going to finish number 1 seed. They're probably going to win 55 to 58 ball games. And I'm going with Giannis to win MVP so far. Who you got next?
I was going to say Defensive Player of the Year.
Okay.
My early pick right now, and I think he probably maintains this just because his team's winning games too. I think Brook Lopez, and it's been kind of surprising because he's coming off surgery at 34 years old, but he's anchoring a top 2 defense in basketball. He's had some great individual games on national TV. The ones that come to mind instantly are the 2 games he's got against Embiid. Even though Embiid kind of got his numbers here and there, especially the one on opening night, he's made it tough on Embiid. I think
Yeah.
individually, I haven't seen a guy guard Embiid better this season. And we know the Bucks' strategy to prevent teams from getting to the paint, and when you do find a way there, it's extremely difficult to finish. Yeah, Lopez is really good at challenging vertically without fouling. I think Giannis obviously deserves some credit for their defense as well, but Lopez has never won the award. I don't think Rudy Gobert is going to factor in the race this year the way Minnesota looks. I would give a shout out to OG. He's been phenomenal on the perimeter, but the award tends to go to bigs, and the Raptors are several games under 500. So I think I like Brook Lopez to win it.
Going into the season, I had Bam. As of right now, I'm still going to stay
Same
firm.
here, same here.
Yeah, I'm still going to stay firm on Bam. I think the impact that he has night in and night out is like no other. Obviously the most versatile defender in the league, if you ask me. And you see the impact in the drop off when he comes off the court for Dedmon. The team is totally not the same offensively and or defensively. We're going to stay on the defensive side. He's able to switch and guard guards. He's able to stay and hold his own against big men. He hasn't had that game that you're speaking on to where like, oh wow, like his impact from start to finish was insane. But I think Bam is clear. I think in the early drops of the voting so far, I think he's around the 4th or 5th spot. I think he should have been top 3. They had Dylan Brooks top 3. Shout out to him. He's playing good defense for Memphis as well. But I think Bam needs to finally get that defensive player of the year. So we'll see how it goes out. think his impact defensively is just like no other for that Miami Heat team.
Hmm. Yeah, I like that one too. Next one I was gonna say is Rookie of the Year. My pick is Paulo Banchero. You know I'm from Seattle, so that's a local kid. He's
Yeah.
averaging a smooth 22, 6, and 4. I think the jumper's coming along. They're encouraging him to shoot threes. I like what Orlando's doing. They're building something special down there. Shout out to them. But they're experimenting with his game. They don't use him in one way. They use him as a screener. They use him as a pick and roll ball handler. They have him cut. They have him come off handoffs, which is what I think is important. Gradually bring a player along. Don't just throw them the ball. Not everybody's Luka, where you can come in and just say you're going to isolate and play spread pick and roll every time down. I think it's important to learn some of these ancillary skills. That way, one day when you do blossom into that player, guys are expecting you to be. Since you've played all those roles, now court mapping becomes easier because you've done it. Now you know where guys are supposed to be. So I think that's an important part of the process in building a rookie. So I like what Orlando's doing there. 10 of the last 11 since he came back from that ankle injury. I think he's had 20 or more. So he's been a very consistent scorer. Um, this rookie class is solid, but I just don't think there's anybody that compares to him. So I really have a hard time seeing, like, even a guy like Benedict Mathurin, I don't think is
Yeah.
impacting, the way the game on a night to night the way Paulo is. And I will say this, with how much hype is surrounding the 23 draft, Wemby, Scoot, and all these guys, I feel like Paulo's just not talked about compared to other previous Rookie of the Year guys. He's averaging like 22, which not many rookies have done in the last 10, 20 years. So I think he's kind of flying under the radar as a Rookie of the Year winner, which is weird because that doesn't tend to happen.
Nah, you're spot on. I remember about probably 2 weeks back when he was dealing with an ankle injury, if I'm not mistaken, and then Matherin
Hmm.
emerged as like the quote unquote number one guy now, and I think Paulo was around 23 points per game. I was telling people that I was having conversations with. I don't really see a drop. I don't see him dropping to 20. I don't see him dropping to 19. I think he stays firm in that 22 to 23 points per game range. And it's crazy that I'm saying this as a rookie. The guy's a rookie. He came in about scoring 20 points in almost every single game that he played so far this year. Um, and that instant impact that he brought for Orlando was phenomenal. I think, again, I was having a conversation comparing the young cores of Orlando and Houston. Someone was telling me Houston. I was all in Orlando, and they're showing why. I think they're on a 7-game winning streak now. Good young team. Markel Fultz is back, and if he can play like the number one pick that he got picked at, and I'm not expecting him to score 20 to 25 night in and night out. Shout out to him. I think he had 24 last night, but just the core that they have brewing, a Bobo, a Wendell, a Franz. Shout out to Franz, Apollo, a Markel, and then to bring Cole and Suggs off the bench when they're healthy. I think that'd be a good thing for Orlando. So I'm rolling with Apollo in that one, easy fashion. I think he averages 21 to 23 all year. He's a tough guy to deal with. Me personally, I don't praise him for his scoring or even his potential outside shooting that can become pretty efficient. He had 6 threes against Boston the other night. I more so like his passing. I like him in that point forward role. He's a big guy. He can see over defenders. He can make almost. No, I'm not gonna say that yet, but I'm just gonna say he's a good passer for his size and his skill set for what he does. What about next? Six man of the year.
Six man of the year, we talked about him earlier. For me, it was a toss up for me. I think I'm okay with either pick between Brogdon or Bobby Portis. I'm gonna lean Brogdon. I think we talked about it. Them getting him for essentially nothing. One of the best moves of the summer. I'm gonna lean Brogdon. I think he's just been a perfect fit for the Celtics. I think when voters look at a new guy coming into a scene, that kind of grabs their attention more than a guy like Portis, who I'm not saying he's going to get penalized for this, but he's been consistent in that role for a little bit. So it's like kind of a boring pick, I feel like. I think they'll lean Brogdon. I think even though he's been phenomenal for them in the regular season, I think he'll continue to be. I think what he can do off the catch, the downhill pressure he creates, another ball handler, I think that's going to pay even more dividends in the playoffs. And a lot of times when voters vote for a regular season award, fans have this weird thing where they confirm the pick based on how the guy plays in the playoffs. So I think Brogdon's that type of guy who's going to play well in the regular season, win the award, and I think he'll back it up with how he plays in the playoffs. So I like
Mm,
Brogdon to win it.
okay. Me, and I'm mad I don't have this written down or I don't remember it. I could be wrong, but I think Bobby Portis is leading all players coming off the bench in double doubles. On the season so far, he's averaging 14 and 10 in 29 games played. I think if he does, and that's hard. I don't know the last time somebody averaged a double double off the bench. To be honest, maybe Ennis Cancer or something like that. I don't know. I think if he maintains that double double average off the bench, I think that'd be pretty good for his case of six man of the year. So short, sweet, and simple. I'll go with Bobby Portis to win that award. I think he
Mm.
probably deserving for him. A guy like him who's been through a lot in his career and sort of kind of like resurged or found his spot, found his niche in Milwaukee, coming from Chicago, coming from New York, and so forth. So I like Bobby Portis for that.
Yeah, he's having a really good season. For MIP, Um,
Ooh.
there's 7 guys in the league averaging 30. Embiid, Giannis, Tatum, Steph, Luka, and KD are the 6, right? And those guys are all bona fide superstars. The seventh guy is SGA. I think anytime you put your name in that conversation, I think it's hard for me to look at that and not, have you winning most improved. Just because people aren't watching him doesn't mean that, he's not going to get the votes for this award. I think, talked about this with Brunson. Brunson's crafty, but I think SGA headlines the league as the craftiest driver of the basketball in the game. And I think it's reflected in how many free throws he's taking. I think quietly, not many people know this, he's shooting over 10 free throws a night. So he's putting a lot of pressure on the rim, and that's with not a lot of talent surrounding him, kind of a rebuilding project he's in. I like Halliburton. I like Laurie Marketing. Those guys have been good, but I think SGA has clearly been on another level when we talk about most improved candidates.
Yeah, I think we're going to see a scenario where, and I agree first off with your pick. I think we're going to see a scenario similar to last year where most people felt like John Morant wasn't deserving of that award. SGA, if I'm not mistaken, off the top of my head, probably averaged 24 to 25 points last year. And now he's in that 30, 31 range. And I think he's going to be in that range all year. It's a tough guy to deal with. He does this little move where he drives to the basket. Doesn't give you a exact push off, but it'll give you a shoulder to make you feel it, and then pull up for the mid range. His mid range shots is obviously one of the best in the league, up there with Jalen Brown's, Kevin Durant's, and so forth. I think SGA is probably only not the right answer, but he's probably the favorite for sure to win that award. And I'll roll with SGA on this one as well. But all in all, LMZ, this was a fantastic 50 minutes speaking with you. We spoke Eastern Conference, Western Conference, Nuggets, Heat, Raptors, Cavs, the whole nine. I think we spoke on majority of the NBA as of right now. Appreciate you, man. You want to do any shout outs for yourself? Appreciate you coming on. You want to do anything, plug in shout outs for yourself?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me on. First off, great podcast. Hopefully, people listen to this. This is really good. Listen, I hope they listen all the way through. I'm on Twitter, NMZ Hoops. YouTube, same thing, NMZ Hoops. I haven't made anything in a while, but I'm pretty frequent. I'm a pretty frequent uploader when I'm on it. So I make a good deal of content. So if you follow me on Twitter, that's probably the best place to keep up with me. I'll plug some of my other work in there, and I'm always live tweeting during games and things I'm watching, and I try to watch all 30 teams as much as possible. So I really love to keep up with the league, and coming on a podcast like this to talk about it is always a fun time.
Yeah, and again, I thank you so much. I meant to reach out to you when I first met you. You came into the space, and I have a good ear for people that actually know the game. And I like everything that you said. So thank you for coming on, man. It was a great experience this with you. And that's what I got to say, y'all. Thank you for watching episode 83. Hopefully you made it to the end. If you did, make sure you like, subscribe, and comment, and check out Facts and Stats on all platforms at Facts and Stats _.